Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, designers, and dreamers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. On this episode, we're chatting with Jourdan Fairchild. Not only is she the interior designer behind Cozy Rock, she also has a deep history in journalism, interiors, print publications, and even some television appearances. So if you've ever felt stuck when it comes to interior design, or just love nerding out on it, this episode is definitely for you. Let's do it. Also, it's worth noting for this episode, we love having you listen to the audio versions on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. But in case you didn't know, we also put the recorded version on our YouTube channel every week, which you can find by searching for Cozy Rock Cabin. The benefit in episodes like this one that reference a lot of visual things, we actually drop images in there so you can see exactly what we're talking about. You should be able to follow along no matter what, but in case that's helpful, just know that it's there. Hey, so excited to have you here today. Welcome to the podcast. For those that don't know, Jourdan is a designer, has been a designer for quite some time now, and I should confess is the design genius behind Cozy Rock Cabin, though I should probably clarify that all of the great design pieces were done by Jourdan. I did do some of them on my own, so if there's anything that causes you to think twice and be like, ooh, that was probably one of mine. All of the stuff you all are shouting out on Instagram is like all Jourdan. So I want to give credit where it's due, but I also don't want her to take any blame for the mistakes that I made along the way. But that's why you're here today, is to help those of our friends in the cabin world learn a bit from you, similarly to how I did in the Cozy Rock process. So to take it way back, you started actually by first designing my first house, like my primary home, and you did 3 different rooms and then a basement in that house. You helped me with. You also took me shopping and taught me a lot on a actual like design in the wild experience. And then you did all of the main design behind Cozy Rock Cabin. So you're bringing a lot to us today.
Yeah, I mean, we have a long relationship, and I think it is why I was like 4 weeks postpartum when you were like, "Hey, I've got a cabin. Can you design it?" And
Yes.
I was like through the fog, like what a dream space. I mean, I had already gotten so familiar with what you like and who you are, but this was the first space I was working on with you that wasn't for you, just for you.
Yeah. That was definitely a different challenge. And yeah, that's probably worth mentioning that you were on maternity leave when we were doing it, which is why I
Yeah.
took some of that off your plate. And that's probably where some of the mistakes happened. But before we dive too far into that, let's go back to the beginning, because I do think it's really helpful for people to know what your background is, because you did not start necessarily as an interior designer. You started your career as a lifestyle magazine editor. So tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get to how that brought you where you are now.
Yeah, so my first career after college, I was a journalism major in college, and I moved to New York and worked in magazines. I worked at In Style. I was always in the lifestyle sort of category. I worked at In Style. I worked for Oprah. She had a home issue that was came out 4 times a year, and then I worked for Country Living. And so, in the process of, I was always writing about design. I was interviewing major experts on the topic. And I was just through osmosis of just exposure being, yeah, just my awareness of what was out there was changing. I was a small town, grew up in a small town in Kentucky. So it to think about how my eye has constantly changed is really fun to trace that back. But basically I was in New York for 5 years as an editor, and then I moved with my now husband to, Chicago, and in Chicago, I had left the magazine world, and was doing more freelance writing. But then I started working for Crate and Barrel and CB2 and working in e-commerce and also working on photo shoots and really learning about furniture design, and learning, just adding to sort of a fuller picture. It certainly wasn't the experience that I thought that I was going to have. I don't know, it's not the career I envisioned, but it's just like the many pivots that a life takes, especially when
Mhm.
it's partnered to somebody else.
Yeah.
And I was always open to trying new things and learning and growing. But I think my editorial background informs the way that I design, the way that I think about how spaces should feel. I think about how they will photograph,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
which is unique in that way. And also, we went to these big photo shoots, these fancy homes, and all the ones that really felt right to me were the homes that felt like the people. Didn't
Mm.
matter how much money you had or how it just it there's a feeling that is home when someone really pays attention to the details, their surroundings, when it all makes a cohesive sense together and it feels like a life has been lived in it. And that is personally like when someone asks what my design style is, which I'm currently personally going through that process of figuring out, there's just a lot of sentimentality and personality in the spaces that I love. So that sort of informed that part of my career. And then when we moved to Durham for my husband's work, again, I started having people ask me to help them with spaces. So it sort of naturally evolved again. And because I had covered so many different types of styles and I had worked in at country living and worked for Crate and Barrel and CB2, which is more modern. And I was very aware of how we all have different, we're drawn to different things. I was able to help clients with small scale projects, and I could sort of help them get what the look that they wanted. That
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily my look, but it was what I knew reflected them. And so I was able to I did small design packages over 4 years.
That's when I met
That
you.
that's when you met me. I can't even remember. It was through, I guess, through a friend
Yep.
that you were connected to me, and you helped me with some video. And yeah, it was really amazing. It was really great for clients because they got to take the knowledge that I was imparting and they could bring these rooms to life on their own time and their own budget the way they wanted.
Yep.
It was less creative fulfilling for me. So we can talk
Mm.
about that later, but it's why there are so few people that do that kind of work and do the kind of work even that I did with you on this cabin.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think, but I think your collection of experiences is really helpful and why we wanted to talk to you on here. Because while you might not be cabin focused entirely, everyone we have talked to so far has mentioned design in some capacity. We've talked to photographers who've mentioned it in terms of what makes a cabin stand out. We've talked to a YouTuber who has filmed at some of the most unique cabins, and he had things to say about design. So everybody is thinking about this, but it's a really challenging thing for a lot of people who either don't have a budget, or even if they do have a budget, how do you find the right person?
Mhm.
I love what you said when we talked to you before this. You said that your work in all of these different fields has been about how to make the aspirational attainable.
Mhm.
And I think when you first started, that inspiration and the aspiration came from magazines, right? Like before Instagram and Pinterest, that's really where people were getting ideas. But in the span of your career, we've really moved towards more of this like internet inspiration is coming from everywhere. It's not just coming from like a curated magazine. How has that changed the way that people think about design in their own houses?
I think it's had a really, in a lot of ways, detrimental effect to the psychology of what people think they should have. I mean, it's just so much more, just like everything, it's so much more complicated than what. I mean, everything is so curated in magazine world, and you plan things for months, if not years, in advance. And it's a very particular point of view. And now there is just so much coming at you. I mean, you think about, I was actually thinking about this the other day. Artists 50 years ago would create work And then, the world would see it at some point, but they weren't constantly inundated with opinions about it. Right.
Mhm.
And if you put it out on the internet and then you're like, boom, here they all are. Opinions, yes, no, or whatever. Then you all start to think like, okay, what's the most appeasing to everyone else's sense of what they think is good? It's like groupthink as opposed to me think in my
Mhm.
home. And
Mhm.
while it is amazing that more people can be exposed, that comes at a cost. I was thinking about this too in preparation. You can get something good and fast, but it's not going to be cheap. It's like the
Mhm.
good, fast, cheap,
Yeah.
you know, problem. And if you're trying to, if you're trying to attract people with your rental and your design, there are some basic tenets. I mean, I think people do appreciate good design. I don't think if it's the right price and it's the good location, and all of this way more than me, but it's like the icing on the cake if it can be look as good as yours, and it does translate to money, but you wouldn't get that too as much if you didn't have beautiful photos, if you weren't in a great location. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
combination. It's just like everything. It's a combination of factors. It can't just be one thing. And if you spend enough time learning, I do think there is something about having an eye, and I think most people are not going to be able to get to a certain level in that eye, because it just takes years and years of practice.
Yes.
But I do think you can educate yourself, and you can start to figure out what you like. If you've got like 10 cabinet counts you're looking at, what is it that they all sort of have in common? Start pinning
Mhm.
things. I mean, this is the like nitty gritty advice I would give somebody. um and it depends on how personal this cabin is to you. Like, is this your family's space or is this purely a rental?
That's right.
um
I've had a tough time understanding like scale
mhm,
of audience, I guess, for what we're putting together. So it's like I think people can get caught up and be like, well, everyone's not going to like this. And it's I think you don't realize how many people could possibly look at this
mhm,
and have the same style that you might have. So
Mhm.
bringing your interest to the space and like little touches is important. And there's plenty of people out there that are going to find that. But again, that's going to bring up, when it's on display, it's going to bring up people that are just going to say straight up, I don't like that. And you got to be
right.
okay with that.
Yeah, you have
But
to have a thick skin.
yeah. And it's the difference between making like, again, something, if it's for yourself, then like you obviously want your touches in it.
Well, the world doesn't need more sameness, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I agree.
Yeah.
um
Yep.
It just doesn't. We've reached such a saturation point. We just don't need that anymore. And so how can you, what the world does need is your individual personality. It needs individual quirks, and as long as things are kept clean and functional. Yeah, I just really push against the idea of like what's palatable.
The short-term rentals too, like it's if you're making something that looks like the rest of things, it's a hotel. It's a hotel.
Mhm, mhm,
So
mhm,
like
mhm.
they do that the best. That you can't do that. So you got
Right.
to make it
What
unique in your way.
what I, yeah, and what I sorry to cut you off. What I often tell people, like, the way you make it unique is just go hyper local. Where you're
Mm.
located, there are artisans, there are makers, there is artwork, there are thrift shops and vintage shops. I was just like earlier this morning, dropped my kid off at school, went by this thrift shop, saw a bunch of things that were North Carolina related. That's where we are. And it's like these treasures exist already. And these people exist already in your areas, and everyone appreciates that. When your guests come in and they know that, and this is something Janice and I worked with, and this naturally fit with what her values, in her own homes. And then also in Cozy Rock, I was like always saying, what can you find in Maine? What artists can you find? What stores can you stock things from locally? If you can, and if you don't have a lot of money, that's when thrifting and vintage is hugely helpful. if you buy quality old pieces, and I don't mean old falling apart, but if you buy pieces that are well made, they're going to last longer for your guests.
Yep.
If you can't afford a high-end piece, or from a reputable store that has a lot of great reviews, find something that's lasted for 60 years. It's going to last for another 60 years if it's well made. You can see it. So,
and that's also
It
going to
also might have,
differentiate you, because I feel
yeah.
like there's a whole lot of hosts out there who are like mass replicating, right? Like, oh, I've seen the profit on one, I'm going to scoop up 4 more houses and furnish them real quick and get them listed, which is fine if that's your investment strategy or whatever. But it's like nearly impossible to do quantity at that kind of unique quality.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
do think it's a way to differentiate yourself visually to someone scrolling Airbnb looking for a place to stay, and they see that yours has its own personality. That's naturally going to be more engaging, but it also subtly tells them like this person is investing themselves in this property, like their time, their energy, their heart, not just their money.
Yeah. People are savvy and our brains were able to remember, they see your rocking chairs. I think people remember, like, even if they've never been, they're on your account. They're like, oh, that's her. That's why, and of course the algorithm feeds that problem. But it is, when you have that one unique, it often can be one unique piece, and the image, everything else is sort of like fine, but it's just that one piece of art, or that one,
Mm-hmm.
interesting coffee table, or that one dresser.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And you
that
taught
feel,
me, you were the one who taught me to pick that first and use whatever you like. Cause my weakness is that I like such unique stuff. And then I try and squash it all together. And it's like, whoa, there's too much
mhm,
going on.
mhm,
You were the one who taught me pick one unique piece that you love and then design around that. And that's where a lot of the
mhm,
colors in Cozy Rock came from, was that rocker, like the color of the cabinets, the
mhm,
wall color. Even the Sarah Madeira Day painting that perfectly matches
mhm.
it was picked because I knew that it would go perfectly with the rocking chairs. If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build cost and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there.
Right. And also, I mean, I was pulling inspiration from the state flag of Maine. I was pulling inspiration of basically nature. And I think this is going to be true with every cabin. I don't know if it's ever been designed or going to be designed. A cabin is creating a space in nature that feels as though it's always been there, right? It's like supposed to feel like it's part of the woods. And so the natural palette of colors outside your window will always feel good inside a cabin. And so the textures and the colors. And so it's going to feel natural. It's going to feel like an extension. And so that is just like, I think my number, like, that feels like one of those, it can work for everybody. Greens, browns, blues, if you're near a lake, just the natural colors. And
I
then
love
stone,
that.
rock, stick, wood, all of that.
it seems to be like easier to be creative off that too. Like
Yeah.
if you just have an
Yeah.
inspiration picture of like a finished room, then I think your thought process is like, okay, well, I need a chair like that, and I need the same color bedding
Mhm.
or mattress cover or whatever. Whereas like if you start with something that may be color, like Janice's chair there, then it's like it's almost a reverse thought process of like you're trying to fit
Mhm.
versus like now you have a
Mhm.
single centerpiece and you're like working out versus like in.
Absolutely. And like maybe there's a great photo of uh a local photo of the area, or you go outside and you take a picture of your feet in the leaves and the rocks in the area, and then you think, okay, what about these colors, or just something you see right outside wherever you're, if you're building, if you're renovating, if you're just something that is directly nearby. Yeah, and you're building off of that. And I know that's really abstract, but you kind of just like go back to your preschool brain and go to like the place that's like, okay, maybe I'm gonna take some really pretty leaves, and then I'm gonna do like, I don't know, I'm gonna look at those colors, and I'm gonna do a leaf rubbing and look at like just the things that you did. I'm gonna gather some sticks together. Maybe I can find, a dining table that, I mean, this could go bad very easily. So
Yeah.
like, I'm like
Always got to
thinking,
take a step back and be like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you're not trying to build everything yourself out of sticks and gum, but it's just this idea of like basics, classics. It's going to hold the test of time. That's going to be worth your investment, because most people are in this to make wise choices and not replace things all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very much an architecture school technique too, to kind of abstract something that maybe holds, because you're going to end up with the essence of whatever it was
Mhm.
without like having it punch you in the face. And like
Yes.
I you're trying to put together like a feeling, and the feeling's not specific pieces of
Mm.
something. It's a whole, it's everything together. So if you keep doing like essences of,
Mhm.
like if you abstract a photo or something, you start to see shapes in it. It's like, okay, we have a lot of rectangular shapes, and how can we build that into maybe the picture layout or something like that,
That's
that
right.
you're not getting, it's not so obvious, but it comes together in the end to feel like something that something familiar.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's an art and a science. I mean, it's a combination of the science is the function, and how everything is, and your budget, and and
Hmm.
figuring out the most efficient output of your time and energy and money and all of that. Um, but without some of the art, it's just that's the missing puzzle piece for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. The function is so big for a cabin because I think to some degree, I think there's been more focus on how it photographs. Not everywhere, and certainly not everyone, but in the Airbnb space, I think there's been a big focus on how it photographs. Meanwhile, I get most excited when people message us or write in reviews about how it felt, how it actually functioned when they were there. Because if you focus just on how it photographs and then they show up and they're like, but this chair isn't even comfortable, or like the room doesn't actually function that well,
Mhm.
then how do you relax? How do you like truly just kind of like melt in and enjoy your time there? How do you approach that when so many people are buying online? Do you have any tips?
It's tricky, and I think it is, without actually seeing things in person. It's not a it's there are going to be mistakes, but you look at the reviews, you look at
Yeah.
see, those aren't always perfect either.
Though they certainly helped
You
with the rocking chair because I was not
Yeah,
sold on. I mean, I loved that rocking chair initially, but it was $1,000. So I was not sold on it
yeah,
until I started reading the
yeah,
reviews and people just talked
yeah,
about what it
yeah.
felt like and the quality of it. And I was like, okay, this is an investment. And it was so worth it.
Also, honestly, reviews are less important when you spend more. Things generally are going to be nicer when you spend more, and that's just because it's higher quality, and so they're just going to be tested. Like, I wish I could take like I did a furniture trip with Crate and Barrel, and we went to the factory, and we're here in North Carolina, and I was living in Chicago, and we went through and watched how what an 8-way hand tied sofa is, how it's actually constructed, and it's amazing. So when you're buying something on Overstock or Amazon or IKEA, if you're paying less, you're probably going to get less, and in pieces that you don't sit on. it's maybe less important. Now, this is
Yeah.
not necessarily true with a rental, but like a side table that maybe isn't going to get a lot of wear and tear, or a nightstand in a rental, probably that many people. I mean, they're going to put their books down on it, but they're probably not going to be like opening, closing doors a lot. I don't know. You think about like,
No, you're right. That would be a good place
what
to
are the
save money.
pieces? Yeah, what are the, and also lighting. You can find pretty affordable lighting, and it's not going to be touched a lot, right? Like it hangs,
Yeah.
but anything that hangs and bottom, like anything that's really touched and sat on, it's going to need to be comfortable.
Yeah. And I learned that the hard way because with my first cabin, I had a much lower budget. I'd never done Airbnb before. That's not true. I did it in my house, but it was the first one where guests would be
Mhm,
staying there.
mhm,
And I bought everything on like Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales from Amazon, Wayfair, like that
mhm,
kind of stuff.
mhm,
And I'll never
mhm.
forget when one of the beds broke. And first of all, the guest felt horrible. They were so kind, but they're
Oh
like, I
God.
just sat on it and I just felt so bad. I was like, this is not your fault. You're totally fine. You do not have to pay for it. But then the process of getting a new bed shipped there and assembled and like all of that when I lived 2.5 hours away was just a huge headache. And I said to you at the start of Cozy Rock, I was like, I do not want to have to do that being in North Carolina. So we're going to spend on those big items for the bed, the
Yeah.
chairs, things that people use. So I didn't have to worry about that.
When we were trying to find chairs and stuff, we ended up with like some article stuff that was very, plain and contemporary, but Justin was looking for kind of more of a statement thing, and he brought up these really cool contemporary like wire, like great chairs. And going back to like what you said, we had to like talk through it and be like, yeah, I don't know if like these are cool, they really make the space something special, but like they're not going to be comfortable. Like
Mhm,
if you're
mhm,
Yep.
sitting
mhm,
around and just trying to enjoy after like
mhm.
a day of skiing, like you don't want to sit in a wire chair.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
maybe there's some stuff you can do to it, but yeah, we ended up moving away from that.
This has been a
Yeah. And
big battle with Sean and I at the lake house because he wants a lazy boy. And it's just like, this is what I want to do when I'm at the lake. And I'm just like, no, it's going to ruin all of our design stuff. So he has been searching constantly for a recliner that I will approve in terms of design. So there is a balance for sure.
they exist now, but they're expensive.
Yeah.
I'll tell you,
We're
they do
saving
exist.
up.
I know.
So you started in magazines and then you went to client work, but now you're building your Instagram and you're starting a podcast. And what I love about that is that
Mhm,
you created for me an addiction to good design, but the skill
mhm,
set is, as you know, you're an expert. It takes years to come by. And so
mhm,
liking design and being able to execute design are two different things. And you're really helping people get the skills they need to maybe not be a professional designer, but at least feel confident designing their own spaces in ways that they like, but are also beautiful to other people. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're sharing on your Instagram that might be helpful to folks? But then also, I would love to hear about your podcast because I just saw that announcement yesterday.
it's a difficult business to be in, when you want to help a lot of people, and you also um, need to feel creatively fulfilled and see something through to the end of a project, to be able to photograph it. I wasn't able to build my portfolio the way a lot of designers can because
Mhm.
I didn't make people promise to photograph it. I stepped away from that, which was quite devastating at the time. And I thought, you know what? I've got to focus on myself and my own home for a little bit. I've been in other people's homes for so many years that I just need to really formulate who I am. And I
Mhm.
want to create a space and teach people along the way that feels like me, in this place that I'm living now. So we had another home not work out, and that took me down another path. And so I renovated for long-term rentals on a
Okay, but
budget.
I know it was really hard for you, and it's called the pivot house because the direction changed a couple times. I know that was hard for you personally. From a
Yeah,
viewer perspective, I
yeah.
really enjoyed watching that process because it was so real. Like how many of us, I mean, everyone listening to this, I'm sure, has run into small problems at the minimum, if not big problems with houses that you've invested in,
Mhm,
and figuring out
mhm,
how to then make the
mhm.
most out of that on a budget, because that's what was helpful. You weren't like showing super high-end designs. You were showing like for a couple
Oh,
$100s, here's how this bathroom went from holy shit to like holy shit, you know? And that was
Yeah.
really fun as a viewer to watch and constantly learning from you where to source items, what kinds of things are trendy, what colors are working. I really enjoyed
Thank
that
you for that.
process.
Hey guys, this is Janice, and in case you haven't figured it out already, we're pretty new at this whole podcasting thing. So it would be a huge help if you wouldn't mind taking a second to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or some kind words on Apple Podcasts. This goes a long way in helping other cabin lovers find this conversation and hopefully become a part of it. Thanks so much, and excited to share more with you.
It was really hard to do the work and also share the work. See, this is the other problem that the
Yeah.
internet has made us think it is simple, and not even simple. I mean, it was really hard to, and I knew it wasn't my best work, which was hard for me. Like I wasn't pushing myself as creatively as I could, which is also sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles and you just got to get through the situation. Once I was able to get through that and learn, there is such interest in it, but it's the way that and also the algorithm is feeding just that constant
I
flow of
know.
content and reels, and it's just exhausting to try to keep up if
Yeah.
you have a normal life and responsibilities, and I have 2 little kids, so it's just a lot. But I'm reframing how I'm thinking about it now because I don't have any, and I turned down that client. That house has been rented, thank God. And now we're in this house that is like a very traditional brick colonial, not my personal style, and I'm having to make it work, but taking my time and being really
Mhm.
thoughtful. And in that process, I'm just learning more about myself, and also it just felt like the right opportunity to start sharing some of that
Yeah.
because I can never really define, like, how can I was so helpful to other people, and now I have to be helpful to me.
But
And
you're
in
still
that
being
process,
helpful to other people because I'm watching all
yeah,
of this and like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you're really hard on yourself saying that it wasn't your personal best because I saw the transformation of the pivot house and really enjoyed that one in particular because you were doing it all on a budget. And that's the position I'm in. That's the position most people are in, where like paint color is going to have to go a long way because I'm not going to be able to do a whole lot else. Light fixtures, gonna have to do a lot of the work. And you were showing how you
I
made that
know.
happen in real life.
Yeah, I think if it was a side project and not like this huge financial
Yeah.
setback that we had personally, I think it would be a little more fun. But
Yeah.
it was the circumstances of the situation, and it wasn't, and I was just ready to get into a home and out of the apartment we were living in.
Mhm.
But the podcast came about because I met a new friend in town, and she has designed a few restaurants in town, and
Mm.
she is really young. What's the younger generation from us? What are they called? Gen Z?
Gen Z?
Gen X?
I think
Gen
it's
Z.
Gen
Okay,
Z. I
so
think
she's
we're Gen X.
no, aren't we millennials? I'm an elder
We're
millennial.
both. I think I'm an elder millennial too.
Okay.
Sean,
Okay.
help us. Are we also Gen X or is Gen X above us?
No clue. I think there's overlap and like there's plenty of like subsections of it. I don't know. I don't even know what I am.
Okay. Well, I talk about her age because she's 27, and she I just mentioned that because she just is like, okay, let's do that. Let's do it. Let's, like, I'm gonna create a logo like this. I'm gonna figure out the right app to use. She's just fast with all of that. And I was a journalist in New York like before,
Mm.
and have friends that do podcasts professionally solely. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Us doing a podcast? We can't do a podcast. You can't just be an average person and do a podcast.
Oh, yes,
But
you
then,
can. Here we are.
but then, I think that industry has certainly changed since I first started listening to podcasts, and what people come to them for is really different. And I knew that if it had a very specific point of view and something to offer that was like tangible and practical, that it would resonate with somebody. And so it's an 8-part series on finding your personal style at home. And it's sort of what we're going to be doing is a lot of what we just talked about with, like, taking pictures in nature. And how do you figure out, because mine is evolving. Margot, my co-host, has a very specific style, especially for a young age, at, like, to me, a young homeowner age. she's really like honed it. And so why is that the case? Whereas I am almost 40 and I'm like, I like so many things. So now we're honing in on like what specifically is me.
That makes
And then
sense
we're
though,
just
because you've been designing other people's houses.
like,
So you've
I
had
know,
to really have a
right,
diverse interest so
right.
that when you hear what someone's design style is, you can still get them there in a really sophisticated way.
Yes. And I've also been living vicariously through other people's homes and also living very much on a budget. My husband was in med school and residency. I was the primary breadwinner. I was not, I was thrifting as a way of life too. It wasn't like I just love thrifting. I
Yeah.
just couldn't. And so this is the first time we've been able to start to make some investments, but still not a lot. So I'm still having to be crafty and clever, and we're building a lot of building things ourselves, painting, wallpapering myself, and hopefully teaching people along the way. And so I think with this personal, finding your personal style, it's a really great exercise for me. Like in the first episode, we talk about our childhood homes and like what about our childhood homes? Why are we always sort of going back to our inner child? And like what about my house felt good? What did I like? How do I also make that good oozy koozy like feeling for my girls? Like
Yeah.
what is it about home? And because that's really where our eye starts, right? We start being aware of the world when we're kids. And so what brings us joy then often still brings us joy now.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like where we're starting, and sort of also the other places we've traveled. We traveled when we were younger, or really cool, like quirky, like the old lady at church that had weird style. Like, what is it about those people and those touch points in your childhood maybe started you on a path? Or even just places that you still think about, that one place you went, you vacationed in Maine and you loved the rustic outdoor feeling
Yeah.
and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. So this sounds like a really good listen for anyone who's in the process of building a cabin, because the beauty of the build process versus the buy process is that you do have a lot of time to think intentionally and go thrifting or wait for items that are back ordered to show up and really dig into your own personal style, and
Mhm.
how you want to then furnish the house when it's done. It's a bit harder. And I think this is why people lean on the like Pinterest, replication and going to big
Mhm.
box stores like Target when you're buying and have to get it rented within a month. You just don't have the luxury of that kind of time. But for folks who are building or slowly working on the design of their house over time, it sounds like this would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, one thing also I'm doing on my own personal account is like, I mean, I'm taking a side table from Target, which is for my daughter's room, because I don't want to spend a lot of money in their spaces, and I'm covering it with removable wallpaper. So I'm wallpapering a side table. So like there are things you can do, and that is an inexpensive project
Yeah.
if you just get a little bit creative. That will make, again, it's going to photograph well too.
Yeah.
So like, and I'm thinking about it for my social media purposes, but that the same would be true for a rental, you know?
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Justin from the Chalet. If you're not already listening to this podcast in a cabin or on your way to one, I'd just like to take a second to let you know that our spring calendar is open, along with a few winter nights to get that last minute ski trip in before the season ends. I'd also like to remind you that our A-frame comfortably sleeps up to 6 guests. We're located just 10 minutes to Mount Snow, 15 minutes to Stratton Mountain, and we're surrounded by tons of trailhead access, including the famous Long Trail. Oh, and the food and drink scene here in Vermont is incredible, since most of it's either raised, crafted, caught, or brewed locally, so you definitely don't want to miss out on this. But to learn more, you can find a link to our page in the show notes below. We hope to see you soon, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Okay, I want to play a little game if you're down for it. I haven't asked Sean
Okay.
about this, so I hope he's okay. I love feedback, so this
I
is
love
fine with
games.
me. Okay, great. We're going to start with
Me too.
mine. I need you to pull up our Instagram, Cozy Rock's Instagram, and I want you to scroll until you see something that you might recommend fixing. So like one small tweak. This is how we get free consultations out of everyone. One small tweak you would make to the design. I want to just see like how easy it is to see a room and just be like, this one change would really make it a little bit more cohesive, a little more inviting, whatever it might be. And then we're going to do it with the chalet frame. Sorry, Justin, you're not here. And I know he did a lot of the design work, but
He's the details guy.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've got so many reels. It's hard for me to.
Well, but you can just look at the cover images and just
Yeah,
get a
okay.
feel for the space and something we could improve.
I didn't realize that you added the wood slices up by the bookshelf.
We sure did. And as I was doing it, I was like, Jourdan might not approve of this.
Nope, I'm okay with it.
Okay, great. It makes it a little busy. I went through a whole thing on stories about how busy it
Well,
was and
here's
got lots of
why.
advice.
One thing I wouldn't have done maybe on those bookshelves is
Yep.
that do you know what I'm gonna say?
I think I know what you're going to say. Can I guess?
The metal bracket.
Yes.
Yeah.
The metal brackets, they're exposed. They were supposed to be built in and then we ran out of time. So it's on our to-do list to replace them. It's just fallen to the bottom because it's functioning. But yes, because that would have made it cleaner and less busy up there, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
hmm
Would you have painted the back of the bookshelf?
Maybe. I want it to feel a little warmer. So that's
Okay.
what I'm trying to figure out. And that's again, you've just got so many white clean spaces that
Yeah.
I also wonder what if you what if you took this depends on the aesthetic, but what if you took old book pages and you decoupage the back of that back wall with
Oh,
old book
shit.
pages? Okay, like things like that, right?
Yeah.
That's cheap. I love a decoupage wall newspaper. Like there's some bathrooms and some cool restaurants that I've been to that like they decoupage a wall, like the bathroom walls in, old like vintage photos or like old newspapers. There was
Yeah.
an incredible, yeah. Anyway, that's an idea.
I love
think-
it. And it would be easy to try on a piece of like plywood or something, pop it up
Yep,
there, see
yep,
how you feel
yep.
about it.
Use
Stay
decoupage
tuned.
glue and you just rip it out. And that way, because a book page is like light in color, but it'd be so subtle.
Mm-hmm. But it would add a little
like
bit of
that a lot.
richness.
Yeah, you can credit me for that one when you get like
I
$1
will.
million on your reel. This is like real-time game. This is like a design challenge on a TV show. Okay. Let me
I
see
love
if I see
this.
anything.
Just from like a, I guess, abstract perspective on the bookshelf, I probably wouldn't have like picked out those brackets, but now that she's saying that, I see like a lot of verticality of that wall with all the book spines.
Mm-hmm.
So almost like, and your shelf is pretty thin in comparison.
Mm.
So like having something that kind of works more horizontally to break that up might help.
Thicker shells. Okay.
Maybe a thicker shelf, yeah, or like the detail of the bracket kind of they tie together or something,
Yeah.
so that you see something a little bit below that.
Yeah, that was a classic. We got to run to Home Depot. It's 10 o'clock. We need these done by check-in tomorrow. And this is the only bracket that they have like 16 of.
I had
Okay.
a lighting question regarding those pendants.
Wait, are you
Where in,
trying
like-
to avoid your analysis, Sean?
Yep, distraction.
Okay, we'll do the lighting question and then we're doing yours.
Okay. Where in like your design process do you start thinking about lighting? Because obviously there's a ton of different types of lighting and they do different things. And then there's like statement and like task lighting. Are you thinking about it like very much up front, or is it later on? Like how does that fit
It depends on the space. In this case, because we had such tall ceilings and we had so much natural light, it was less of a focus. In a normal home with normal ceilings, it's definitely very important, but I would say it's not as important at what the eye sees first, which is like your ground floor. I would say we spent the most time on the lanterns in the hallway. That
Mhm.
trio, I wanted that to be really special for Janice, and that was sort of like a last minute, wait, we got to do something to fill this
Yes.
space.
I love them so much.
But the sconces, a lot of them she sourced.
Although,
like
except the
maybe-
one big exception is the
What is that?
orange one. I love the orange
Oh,
one that you
yeah.
sourced because it's so
Yeah.
funky and it's so useful because you can reshape the direction, but it also created that pop of orange, which originally I
Yeah, we
wasn't.
needed something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And back to what you were saying about replicating the colors outside. At first, I wasn't sold on the orange, but in the fall, like that is one of the prominent outside colors you see. So keeping it on the inside with just a couple pops here and there and that small light is like one of my favorites. You definitely sourced that one. You also sourced the ones in the bedroom by Matt Elford Studio that I love.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
those make that room.
Basically every room needs like at least 3 sources of light. So it is important because you got to think about it like this. You need light at different times of the day for different things. And then you also need it at different times of day in different seasons. And so the more touch points you give a person, and always, always, always use the soft light as opposed to the crisp white light, which
Mhm.
feels clinical. The soft light feels warmer. It feels more like the natural sun.
Mhm.
That is something, if you give people options, it just makes a single room have different feelings, like depending on the day. So anyway, you got a lamp behind you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You like have it
Oh,
on.
well,
There
I
you
brought
go.
that in for today. So
There you go.
glad you noticed.
Sean looks
Yeah,
so
just
proud of
lamp.
himself for those of you who can't see him. He just did a little body shimmy, like I did bring that lamp in.
Yeah, lamp light is so cozy.
But
Truly. And so I think that
the right
Oh,
light
check
bulb
this
though
out.
is like game changing because I spent so
game
much time,
changing.
and now that I found that
Yes.
2700K is my magic
Yes.
temperature
Yes.
for
Yes.
cabins, everything is
Yes.
easier. But it took me forever because some of them are amber glass, some of them are clear glass, some of them are
I know.
warm, but
I
they
know.
don't tell you what the temperature is. So for anyone wondering, I think that 2700K is the magic.
Yes. Yes. I agree.
I've got a
And
smart bulb in that one that I can change to
What?
cooler and
oh
warmer
yeah,
light.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
see?
Those exist too.
Wow, that sounds
Whoa.
expensive. Okay, so
No, they're not
now
too bad.
pull up the chalet frame on Instagram.
Okay.
And let's give them some design feedback. I love that I just lumped myself in there.
We're yeah, we're trying to fill it out more too. So we'll take all these things to heart, but it's a very simple white
Oh, I
layout.
love your pendants. I love the simplicity of those and how clean and modern against all your lines. Mm-hmm.
I think we need like more details. We've done a very like
Mm-hmm.
clean
Mm-hmm.
thin line, and I don't know if we've gotten to like the smaller details yet.
Okay, so the shot where on November 2nd with is that where the 2 leather chairs are up against the window?
Yep.
Are they positioned like that? Are there ever any chairs across from the coffee table on the other side?
Yes, we just switched that because we put the Christmas tree up, and the Christmas
Oh,
tree took
okay.
the space,
Okay.
which feels better.
Yes. Yes, because here's the thing, seating needs to talk to itself. Talk to like that's a weird way to describe it, but it basically you have to imagine people sitting in it being close enough to talk to one another. And so you need to make sure that seating is never too far away from each other. I also think a very short, modern, because I can tell that's your aesthetic, really a lamp right
Mm,
there would be really nice. Because I know you've got the wall coming up pitched, but I think having some lighting will really help that what we're talking about with the different sources of light. Um,
You can tell I'm new at podcasting because I just proposed a very visual game and folks are likely listening.
no, no, no.
But-
Janice, I was gonna say this is sweet because like people can follow along now.
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe not everyone if they're driving their car, but like if they're watching, they can pull it up too and
Yeah.
scroll through and see what they
And also, we are posting each of these episodes on YouTube. So if you watch on YouTube, I'm going to be dropping these photos in there so you can see them directly. But apologies for
that's
those
fair.
of you who can't see this, just pull up Chalet Frames Instagram and you'll be able to see it there.
When did y'all finish?
finished in well, I guess we
Well,
finished we opened in September, so I mean
amazing.
the decor stuff we had purchased throughout and tried
Yeah.
to get it in
So
there and then see what we left.
made really conservative, some and very like timeless classic choices so far, and I think that's awesome. And I think now you just, and I still think you don't have to be, it doesn't have to have this cabin aesthetic. Like I think that's important to mention. Like not every place needs to have that vintage worn rustic feel. Not everything has to necessarily be old if that's not your aesthetic. I think it's more about the idea of creating layers and individuality, and pieces that people will see and then remember it's from your place.
Hmm.
So like it's not that y'all necessarily have to bring in color if that's not what you want to do, but you do. If you don't bring in color, you need to bring in a bunch of texture.
Hmm.
So you need to bring in and especially in the winter, some like if you want to bring in like faux sheepskin or wool or blankets, or you need to bring in what feels natural at that time of year, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
We
think
took a lot of our initial inspiration from, I think Burton started in Vermont, but they have some stores up at
Mhm.
Stratton, base of Stratton, and we liked kind of like the vibe of that, where
Yeah.
I think they did a good job of like clean, like
Mhm.
set some semblance of like classiness, but
Mhm.
industrial kind of mixed
Mhm.
in,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
also just like that the vibe of like snowboarding and skiing where there's just like a sticker kind of stuck somewhere
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that has just like that super contrasted. We were trying to like, that was a lot of our early inspiration of what we were trying to capture.
Okay, that's interesting. So that's sort of a little more casual, right? And a little
Yeah.
more.
And I
Mhm.
think that's where like some of our artwork comes from, where it's like a pop on the wall versus
Yes.
this kind of like,
Yes. I'm trying to see if there's any image of the artwork that I see. I was just gonna tell you, I feel like I want like some really big, like badass, like I think you're gonna make more impact with singular, like one really great piece, one really great like snowboard that's been painted.
we talked
I don't
about, not to like give away our chit chat behind the scenes here, but we had talked about that huge wall that's against
Mhm,
the stair,
mhm.
and doing some sort of pattern or like custom wallpaper
Yeah.
that kind of has elements of what we maybe like hiring an artist to kind of come up with little things, and then that becomes more of a pattern when you're far away, but when you're
Yes.
closer you kind of see details that make up our cabin or the local scene.
And
Yeah, I
there's
like that.
more
I like
people
the idea.
out there, artists specializing in murals and
Mhm.
Airbnbs, which has been tempting
Yes.
for me with that big white wall going down the stairway, but I have to like rein myself in sometimes. But I think that would be super fun because it's so notable and like something people could take
Mhm.
pictures in front of, immediately
Yeah.
recognize, and you have a great wall for it.
I think that, yeah, a mural could be. I'm looking at, okay, there's an old picture of it.
Do
Oof,
it.
yeah, like something with like some really great, also, you have a lot of angles,
Hmm.
and so a little bit of curve would give that, like, here's a snowboard sticker on the back of a
Hmm.
Yes. Okay,
black
guys, we've
Jeep.
decided. It's time for you to do a
Okay.
mural. Great.
But
We're
Great.
listen, there
working
are
on it.
people, I would caution doing something yourself that big, that statement. I think you would probably need to hire somebody if you're gonna
Yeah,
do
yeah,
it.
no, that's
Yeah,
definitely
okay,
not us.
okay.
We
'Cause
have an image from Zeb Mary's, I think, out of Connecticut,
okay,
and we had thought about him because I think he had done it in a couple other, for like a restaurant where they had
okay.
something similar, and we thought it would be
Well,
cool. So
and also
definitely not us.
here's the other thing too. You change your mind in a couple years, you paint over it.
I
Like
know.
there's also, I think people are way, way, way too precious with playing with things like that. And I know it's an investment to hire someone, but I just think you have to also think if you're playing this game that we're all playing, where we're trying to get whatever we're trying to get. We're trying to get, well, y'all are trying to get money. You're trying to get, um, people to stay. Those are the spots that people take photos of. So, I mean, that's just seems like a wise business investment too.
So do you think that we should do one on our stairway, Jordan?
I
That
have to
big
think
white
about
wall.
that. I have to
I
think
know
about
it's a
first you gotta do
lot.
first you gotta do my book page wall.
Okay.
I think it could work if it was a more quiet
Okay.
mural.
Subtle.
Because we've got those lanterns, we've already got it. See, they have a real blank slate. we've already
Yeah.
built some, but I do think it could.
I'm just itching for it. It's like tattoos. I'm like dying to get
Yeah.
another tattoo, and I'm dying to put a mural on that wall.
Only if
So,
it's of your
okay.
face.
I'm literally watching over you as you're in the cabin. Oh man, Jourdan, I could talk to you about this stuff all day, which is why I'm so grateful that you're documenting so much of what you're doing personally on your Instagram. Can you tell everyone where they can find you, the name of your podcast, how to sign up for your email list? Because your newsletter is the only newsletter that I read in its entirety every time you send one out. Let people know how they can find you.
Thank you to you and my mom. It is, so my full name is Jourdan Fairchild. Everything's under that website, Instagram.
Jourdan.
Jourdan.
We'll
It's
put it in the
French.
show notes.
I'm not French. It is French. And I'm Southern. And what was the other question?
Your
My podcast name. The podcast name is Home Addressed. So we are home, addressed. We launch on the 9th of January. It's just an 8-part series to start. It will be on Spotify, iTunes. Hadn't thought about YouTube.
Yeah.
Maybe that should happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, come find me. We'll be talking. I'm basically starting. I've done 3 rooms in our home and we have like 15 to go. So
I love it. We got a lot of content to catch up on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining us and for all the good advice that you gave to folks today. It was a treat.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcasts in review. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can find us on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and The Chalet Frame, spelled The Chalet, CHALA Frame. Looking forward to next week.